So you're born with a Gemini moon. What does that mean? So my last video was on a Taurus moon. The one before that was on an Aries moon. The next one will be on Cancer. I'm going down the whole zodiac. But the thing is if you guys notice, all these moon signs are drastically different from the one before them and the one after them. And that's why, you know, there's so much to us human beings, because a lot of times if we have a lot of planets in one sign, we got the sign next to us and the sign before us going on too. So never mind all the aspects and final dispositors and everything else that go into learning astrology. But the Gemini moon is drastically different from the Taurus moon. And when I talked about this before in the last video, I know it seems like I reiterate myself, but I'm aware that not everybody watches every single video. So in the West, us Western astrologers learn that the moon is essentially our emotions, the mother, women in general. You know, that's what it is, how we process emotions, how we see the world emotionally. And then Mercury is the way we think and how we communicate, right? So in the East, it's a little bit different, because what we learn over in the East, and this makes total sense to me, is that the moon is also our mind. And from doing charts for so many years, I would notice that people that had, you know, the moon in hard aspect to some planets, or in a difficult aspect to a malefic like Saturn or something, that those people would have a tendency towards depression. And, you know, and it didn't mean that that was their destiny to be depressed the rest of their life, but it was something that they needed to guard against. They needed to kind of do things to think differently, you know, certain remedies for health and stuff like that to guard against depression or anxiety or any of that kind of stuff. But then you realize what's really going on here is that the moon is our mind. So if somebody has the moon squaring Saturn, Saturn is it's a malefic, and it can kind of, it's kind of like a wet blanket kind of a vibe, you know, it brings everything down, so you're not feeling too good, too up. So they tend to think negative when the moon is squaring Saturn. Now, they can overcome this because people can go overcome things, but self-awareness, you know, a self-awareness is what it takes to overcome it. And that's why I love astrology so much. So anyways, let's talk about the moon in Gemini. And, you know, Gemini is a mutable air sign. So there is a ton of flexibility here. There is a ton of communicative ability here. And there is a ton of knowledge to be tapped into with a Gemini moon. These people are typically pretty witty and can be fun to hang around. Now, Gemini rules the third house, which rules neighbors, communication, siblings, short distance travel, all that kind of stuff. So when you think of like things happening quick, not in a Uranian, like out there kind of way, but in like a intellectual, like, let me change, let me change, let me change. That's the Gemini moon. So they're very different from the fixed signs. They're very different from the Taurus moon, the Aquarius moon, the Scorpio moon, the Leo moon, because they're mutable and they change. And this is why sometimes people have a hard time with Gemini moons, because they're like, they might have a lot of fixed planets going on and they're like, I don't understand this person at all. They're this way one minute. And the reason why is because it's intellectual. It's air. They're not like, they might feel it. They're human. Of course, they're going to feel things, but the brain is always kind of like going, because Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So Mercury is the way we communicate and stuff like that. So the brain just moves on and moves on and moves on and moves on. And for like somebody with a Taurus moon, they're going to be like, I don't get it, because, you know, this is the way it is and this is how I feel and I'm not changing the way I feel. A Gemini moon is like, no, I'm going to change the way I feel. So to me, there's a certain element of freedom in that moon, right? I mean, I don't have a Gemini moon, but to me, it seems like it could be kind of fun, because you're just like here and there and everywhere else. What they got to guard against is lack of follow through. Because they're not fixed, because they're so mental, they can be on to one idea and then, you know, a couple minutes or days later on to another idea. So what I've noticed from clients of mine that have had a Gemini moon in the past is a lot of times they'll start something and it's great. Like, it's a great idea. You know what I mean? Like, you can totally see their potential going on with it, everything else. And then halfway through, they're like, nope, I want to do this now. You know what I mean? Is it boredom? maybe a little bit, but it's a lot of also like things aren't happening quick enough, and they just got so much going on mentally. So it's like they're, and so what I always tell my little advice to Gemini Moon people, or people with a lot of Gemini anyway, is to write down one goal, each little bullet point step to complete it, and then cross it off. And then when that goal is complete, start a new one. That's just do one at a time, because it's kind of like this all over energy and that's why a lot of times they don't really hold grudges, because they can be like, okay, well, I don't like this person one day, but then they almost like forget about it or something. It's wild to me. Like, it's great, but it's wild. Like, they forget about it. Like, I don't get that at all. You know what I mean? So, and then they move on to something else, and then come back and whatever. So the follow through is probably their biggest issue. Now, as far as like hanging out with them and stuff like that, they're fun, because a lot of times I found them to be fun because they're kind of quick witted and everything else. Like I said, it's a very mental kind of placement to have the moon. It's not overly like, let me cry about everything. Now, if they got a lot of Cancer going on the chart, which a lot of times they do, because like I said, a lot of times, we have a lot of planets in one sign, but more often than not, we have other planets in the sign before us and the sign after us. And that's what makes it, we're such just a whole big bag of different things, just even in basic astrology. But this moon is known for its intellectual pursuits and like I said, communicative ability. So they're very good at like speaking and talking, and a lot of times kind of being the life of the party. But if you want this real like fixed, solid, like, okay, I'm getting there, I got tunnel vision, it's probably not going to be a Gemini moon, but they are fun. I'll give them that. They're definitely fun to hang out with. So next I'll be doing Cancer moon, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.